to the Happy Lawyer Project. I'm your host, Akoma Moronu, and I created the show to help lawyers find happiness in life with a law degree. Together with my guests, we provide the knowledge, skills, insight, inspiration, and encouragement you need to find your happy. Hello there, lawyers. So I know that I have been out for a couple weeks celebrating Thanksgiving and enjoying some time with my family. So I'm super excited to be back behind the mic. And I just wanted to let you guys know that Dave is here with me today, Mr. Happy Lawyer Project.
What's up, y'all?
So before we jump into the show, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping for you guys and give you guys an update on the schedule for the rest of this year. I am going to be doing a lot of Q&A questions to kind of address the questions that have been coming in over the last few months. So for the rest of the year, I will be doing Q&A. If you are not into the Q&A episodes, rest assured that the interviews will be back in mid-January. And so I'll be doing Q&A up until Christmas, then I'll take a couple of weeks off. And then we're going to bring a new revamped interview show for you guys in January. So you have that to look forward to. And then on the personal side, I just want to say a huge thank you to you guys because the show was again honored by the ABA as a top legal podcast. And so that's such a huge deal for me to be one of the 10 podcasts in the whole country to get on this list. Thank you to all of you who voted and who really support this show. It means so much to me. For those of you who would like to hang out, I have just confirmed that I will be speaking at GalCon in DC in April. So GalCon is the Girl Attorney Leadership Conference. You guys may have heard the interview that I did with Susan, and she's holding her first conference, and it's for women attorneys, and it'll be in DC April 25th through 27th. So you guys will see more of that as we get further along and closer to the conference. I'm super, super excited to be chatting about wellness and happiness and meet all of you guys in person. Now to today's episode. So back in September, Dave and I were up in Connecticut doing our quarterly couples retreat. And we got a ton of questions about what that is. And there was just a ton of interest about what the freak we were doing up in Connecticut, just the two of us, talking about our life goals and dreams and all these things. And so I thought it'd be super fun to share with you guys kind of how we as a couple plan these retreats, what we get out of them, and how we use them to kind of create structure and alignment in our lives. In particular, we got a lot of financial questions. And so I ended up having to pull that out of this episode, and we'll do a separate episode on finances, how we set financial goals, how we align our financial goals, how we plan, how we spend, how we budget, all that stuff. So if you guys have specific financial questions, you can still send me questions on that. And you can email me those questions at Akoma, Okeoma, at thehappylawyerproject.com. Or you can just DM me on Instagram at The Happy Lawyer Project. If you're not following me on Instagram, you should. Or you can leave a voicemail on the website at thehappylawyerproject.com. There's a little tab on the upper right-hand side of the screen, and you can just click it and you can leave a voicemail right there, and then I'll play your voicemail on the show. So I look forward to answering your finance questions, but for today, we're going to focus mostly on the couples retreat component of our planning. So hopefully this, for those of you who are trying to plan 2019 with another person, this will be helpful in doing that. You ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm really excited. So the first question is, what is a couples alignment retreat, and how did you guys get started doing this?
So I probably should have mentioned that we got a bunch of different questions, but since the questions all sort of related to each other, I kind of broke them into categories and just put them in an order that made sense instead of reading people's direct questions. So you'll just hear Dave's going to help me out by reading the questions and, as usual, keeping me on track. Yes. So to the question, what is a couples alignment retreat and how did they get started? So challenging to coordinate all of those goals and dreams and priorities. So I, being the type A person that I am, put a structure in place. And really in the last year and a half, 2 years, it's really become much more structured. And the way I like to think of it in terms of, for all of you entrepreneurs out there and all you people who read business books is if you've read the E-Myth, when he talks about working on your business versus working in your business, for us, this time is really a time to work on our marriage and on our relationship versus in it. You can get so caught up in the day to day of what needs to get done that day or that week or that month that you're not really taking that step back to say, is this how we want to be spending this day, this week, this month? And so the goal is to really be strategic and to get out of the tactical and to not get into the weeds, but to stay very, very high level. Would you agree?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, in fact, even just setting that as a priority for me personally, sort of as the one who's not necessarily holding the reins on making this process happen, just identifying that that's the priority is to be that way and to remove yourself can really help you be more productive and be more present and more aligned so that the outcomes, are actually more useful for me and for us.
Yep. I mean, for us, the real goal of this time away and this time together is to reconnect, to realign, and to recharge. And when I'm setting the schedule and when I'm planning these retreats, those are the things I'm keeping in mind.
Absolutely. I would want to add one thing that I think you can help people with for their first one maybe is the actual practical logistics of it. Because when I tell people about this, they're like, what does that even mean? So I guess the next question really answers that perfectly. People want to know, do you have a structure and an agenda that you follow every time?
Oh, how much do I love my structures and agendas? So yes, absolutely. I am somebody who definitely needs an agenda. And I think for something like this, you absolutely should have one. Initially, I was going to talk you guys through my whole agenda, and then I realized that was going to be really, really boring. So if anybody out there wants to see a sample agenda, I'm happy to share it with you. It's very detailed, but just at a high level, the way I think about it is that there needs to be specific items that have to be on the agenda. And so typically we would start with intention setting. And that means the first session, whether that's at a dinner or whether that's a sit down session, is where we really set the ground rules about what we want to get out of that weekend, what the priorities are, what the goals are, because it's going to be impossible to touch on everything. So if the goal is to figure out family stuff or to figure out work stuff or to figure out 5-year plan, you just kind of set that initial intention. Or is it just to kind of, is this, retreat more about recharge than realign? Whatever that intention may be, you kind of align your intentions at the very beginning and kind of, hold each other accountable and let the other person know, if I start to talk about this stuff, just remind me that's not what I want to do this weekend. And then typically early on, I have separate time where we can each go away and do our own thinking before we have to kind of share with the other person. So typically the intention setting usually happens over dinner on that Friday evening. And then the separate time would be the first thing the next morning. Usually we'd go to a coffee shop or have breakfast, and we'd either sit at the same table or separate tables, depending on how much space or whatever, where we are, in the mood. And because I am super controlling, maybe, I usually will have journaling prompts just to make sure that we're thinking about the same things and that we aren't just we come back together and completely misunderstood what we were trying to get out of those sessions. And then after those journaling prompt sessions and that separate journaling sessions, we would usually do some sort of activity together or some sort of something to get us talking and active where we can share our dreams without feeling like we're staring at each other. Because sometimes it can be a little bit awkward to stare at a person for an hour and share your deepest, darkest, secret dreams that you're too afraid to even say out loud. And so while we were in Connecticut, we did a hike. But I think anything where you're together and have a little bit of privacy, but aren't looking directly at each other would work. So it could be a car ride. It could be a hike. I don't know, where else are people sitting next to each other or walking next to each other, that go to a park and sit on a bench. I think there's something about not having to stare each other in the eyes and kind of having...
Yeah, and a change of scenery was really helpful. And I mean, not so much for you maybe, but being really active gets the juices flowing. And for me, I really think of it as a warm up because it is a big change of gears for me to share all this stuff. So, yeah.
So another really super important thing about planning for me is the food. I'm someone who gets a lot of food anxiety. I love to eat. I like to eat a lot. I like to eat often. So beforehand, I would definitely recommend you make reservations for all your meals because there's nothing, and I don't know what it's like when you're with your significant other, but there's nothing worse than when you're kind of in the flow and then you try to have that what do you want to eat conversation, and it leads to an unnecessary disagreement and everyone's frustrated for no reason. So I tend to pre-reserve everything so that we just know where we're going and it's all set. And it's kind of like an all-inclusive vacation that you plan for yourself. and then, kind of buy your favorite snacks and treats so you have them in the room. Because to be honest, sometimes the sessions are going so well or the discussion is going so well that you'd rather just stay and finish it than go to your reservation. And nobody wants to be hangry when you're trying to, build your dream life. That just doesn't work. And so there's also the financial component. There's always a financial component, and there's financial pre-work involved, which means both parties have to kind of gather their financial information. We track our financial information monthly, and I track it weekly. So for us, that's pretty set in stone. And I can talk about this more on the financial episode, but that's stuff you have to do beforehand. Otherwise, it'll take up too much time during the sessions. And if you are really interested in doing like a real financial deep dive, I think it would be wonderful to have like a financial advisor that you pay for like an hour or 2 hours to join you for that and help you talk you through your goals. I think it's well worth the money and the time to invest in that. And so we would have two types of financial sessions. One, which is just really practical and where are we? How close are we to where we thought we would be at this point in the year? And then the second half is the financial alignment. It's what do we need to change to get back on track, or have our goals changed such that we don't need to be doing those things anymore? Were those bad goals? Were they, did we not account for X, Y, and Z? And how do we get back into alignment? How do we basically the point of this is how do we get our finances to match our dreams?
One thing that I think might be useful because I get the sense that a lot of people who follow you and listen to these and are so into them are kind of like you and often have partners that are not like you. So one question that I think would fit in really right here is if you could talk a little bit about how you got my buy-in for this the first time, because now I'm like so gung-ho about it. I keep not interrupting you to say how great the thing you're talking about is when you do it. But not that I was ever a stick in the mud, but I remember that you had to kind of warm me up to the idea.
I actually don't remember. I remember you always loving it and thinking it was an amazing idea.
So another key to having a great relationship is positive amnesia.
Yeah, I suffer from a buttload of that. So I don't remember how I did it, but what I would recommend, and you can tell me if this is how I did it, is really, especially those first few times, making it fun. Do you know what I mean? Like making sure, like if you can plan it for us, like the Connecticut one, we planned it around a trip we were already taking. If you plan it around a vacation, maybe that's you go to, you could drive somewhere close by, a staycation somewhere that you guys have been wanting to go. Really, I think the schedule actually helps, because if you say to someone, I want you to share all this like emotional stuff about your dreams and your whatever that they may not have thought about, it can feel very intimidating or nebulous, and they might not understand the point of it. And so being really clear that it's not going to be, there's a purpose to it, and it's to have this alignment, and that it's going to be very structured, and you're not going to expect them to kind of come up with all this stuff on the fly, I think would be helpful for a lot of people. And that out of it will come kind of very concrete goals and action steps. Because I know for Dave, that's something that's very helpful to him, because it's not, well, now he loves to just talk about all this stuff. I think in the beginning, he'd say, I think it would have been a harder sell.
Yeah. If they're not into the woo-woo, it takes a little while to get there. And it's very helpful to have it be practical and actionable.
And I think, and when you think about like the restaurants and the activity you're planning and things like that, the more you can cater it to stuff that you guys have been wanting to do but haven't had time to do, that alone may be worth their time investment, is to say, how we've been meaning to go, to this place 2 hours away and try all these restaurants that we've wanting to do. And you've always said you want to do like rock climbing, whatever the case may be. Why don't we go away and do that for a weekend? And I'd love to also have these conversations while we're away so that we can come out of that weekend, reconnected, realigned, and recharged. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be really useful. But yeah.
Yep.
So what's next on the list?
So this kind of fits in actually with what you're just saying. The question is, how do you navigate compromising when it comes to holding different priorities?
So I love listening to Paula Pant's podcast, and she always says you can have anything but everything. And I firmly believe that that's true. And for me, accomplishing your goals is really about being disciplined about your priorities and values. And so as an initial step, you need to understand what those priorities and values are. And to be fair, I didn't really know if this question was, how do you compromise if you and your partner have different priorities, or how do you compromise when you guys have multiple priorities? So I'll talk a little bit about both. When you have different priorities, I think you really have to come down. It becomes a compromise and a values conversation. So, for example, early in our relationship, my priority very much was having children. And Dave's priority, what was your priority? Was not having children.
Yeah. I think early on in our relationship, I was mainly just interested in figuring out what the heck was going on for each of us individually and with us together, and like just being irresponsible and having fun to some degree. But it was all very nebulous. You know what I mean? My issue was actually basically exactly what you just said. I didn't have very explicit or clear priorities. Like even just getting to that point was a level up moment for me. So that's one of the things that we had to overcome for sure.
Yes. So I think that early on, we kind of had these conversations. I mean, now, like off the top of my head, it's really easy for me to tell you what my 3 values are. You know, my values are adventure, joy, and family. And those are my guiding principles for everything I do and every decision that I make. If it doesn't directly support those values, I've probably gone off track. And learning to see the overlap between your and your partner's values is very key, because Dave, in some way, very much values security, and that can feel like it's in conflict with my value of adventure. But we've quickly learned that there are ways that I can reassure him about security while pursuing my desire to have a lot of adventure. And it's a discussion that has to be had. Managing and navigating conflicting priorities or multiple priorities is always going to be a challenge. But the more clarity you have around what those are and why those are, the easier it is to have the conversation. And the easier it is to say, this is super important to me because of this. Can we do this now? And then I know this is important to you. I promise that will be next. Or, you know, is it possible to pursue both of the things at the same time? And so in that light, I wanted to chat about what it's like when you have, you know, multiple priorities. Because for some people, and I think for a lot of people, it's that conversation about saving versus paying off debt, or like buying a house versus paying off your student loans. And I'll talk about this more in depth during the financial podcast. But I think with that, it's really about getting into the details and really figuring out, when do you want to buy a house? Go and see, how much does that house cost? In order to buy that house, how much money would you have to save? How long? You just have to work backwards and figure out realistically how much would you have to be saving each month in order to buy that house in that time frame. Likewise, how much debt do you have to pay off? When do you want to pay that debt off? And you work backwards, and then you kind of line the numbers up and figure out what, and this is where I get a little bit woo-woo with it, and this is really a gut feeling. Which of those goals feels worse to miss? If you want to buy that house in 5 years, and you could buy that house in 5 years, but it means paying off your debt more slowly, do you feel worse in 5 years with a house and debt, or do you feel worse with no debt and no house? So that's the way I would think about it. But again, it really, really comes down to identifying where the pressure points are and where the true conflicts are, and then figuring out the details for what it would take to make it work and whether or not you're willing to do that work. And so having these journaling conversations and these dream goals conversations, because sometimes you think something is a priority, but then once you know someone's, if you know someone's like 10-year goal is to live in Spain and like own a vineyard, and they're, you know, talking about how important it is now to like work 80-hour weeks, and they can't take travel because they need to, you know, get to the next stage in the corporate ladder, that's a good opportunity to say, how does your short-term desire to do this align with that long-term goal? Because sometimes we get so caught up in the day-to-day of what the immediate kind of task and goal seems to be that we forget to say, well, maybe I could still get to that vineyard in Spain without becoming the CEO of this company. I just have to save a little bit more, but that's worth it to enjoy my life until I get to that point. Does that make sense?
It really does.
Great. So what is the next question?
Well, there's one thing that you said that was really good that took me a long time to learn that I think is just worth repeating for a second and drawing out. And it's the difference between priorities and values. And you spoke on it very well, so I don't want to try to add anything new to that, but that was a really big learning moment for me. And you laid it out really nicely just now when you said what your 3 values are, because that can really help you zero in on what is actually the priority and what else can wait, like what's most aligned with your core values. And going through that process of identifying those things really empowered us to communicate more clearly and plan better.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really, really great exercises out there around figuring out both your values and priorities and being really ruthless about deciding, if I had to have A, B, or C, which one is the real priority? If I had to pick, gun to my head, which one, if I, at the end of my life, didn't accomplish, do I feel like I really should have been more focused on it? And I know that sounds really dramatic, but that's sometimes you come to junctures in your life where you have to make that decision, and you don't want to be thinking about it for the first time when that question is being asked, when that opportunity is before you. You want to be able to jump at opportunities because you know that they align with that number one priority.
Yep, absolutely. Which segs into the next question. How do you get away from challenges of what is and into the mindset of what could be? Do you set ground rules during these retreats? For example, no criticizing, no saying no to an idea.
That's such a good question. And I think that sometimes I forget that we've been doing this for a while, so it comes much more easily to us at this point. But this all comes down to the pre-work and the expectation setting and having clear frameworks around each of the sessions in your retreat. So some of the sessions are clearly, what do I want to get out of my life? What do I want to accomplish in the next 6 months, in the next 1 year, in the next 5 years? And why do I want to accomplish those things? Why are they important to me? Why do I think they should be, worth noting at this point and worth highlighting and bringing to your attention? And during those sessions, you're not going to say, how am I going to accomplish that? You're not going to say, these are all the challenges that I would have in accomplishing that. That's not the purpose of those sessions. So when you're having like those dream conversations about what your dream life is about, you need to be very clear that that's not the time. And I think that when you have set aside clear time in the retreat to talk about the how, to talk about the when, and to align it with your finances and to align it with your schedule, it's a lot easier to stop the person and say, would you mind if we talk about that tomorrow? Setting the ground rules, but also making space for those conversations, I think is really important, because for a lot of people, not having those conversations would be really, really hard. And to just stop at the what and the why. For me, I could dream all day. That's my favorite part. The how and the when is when I start to get really uncomfortable. But Dave loves the how and the when. That's his favorite part. And so we really set time aside for both. And a lot of this is really knowing yourselves and knowing what you guys need to get out of this. So this is really just an example of what we do. And hopefully you can extrapolate things from our experience that can help you put together your own sessions and really get value from them.
Yep, absolutely. That is perfect. Last question. Do you talk about career goals and frustrations freely, or do you silo these conversations? What works for you?
So I think this goes back to what I was saying previously about setting frameworks and clear agenda and all of those things. I have mixed feelings about how much quote unquote negativity should be in these sessions. As Dave said, I kind of have, what did you call it?
Positive amnesia.
Yeah. I tend to lean towards the positive and like to really focus on the positive. And I think that these sessions should do that. If you feel like there is value in sharing those frustrations or challenges or obstacles, if, for example, you set aside specific time to say, I want to talk through some of the challenges I'm having from last year's goals. I set this goal last quarter. I didn't get very far. I want to set aside specific time to talk through my roadblocks, the mindset that's keeping me held back, and see if you have any thoughts or make specific asks of you to help support me in this next quarter. Great. I think that's an amazing use of the time. If it's just going to be a venting session where you just reiterate things that you've said over and over again and that the other person knows and that tends to spiral for you because it's a conversation and a thought that you've kind of been rolling through your head for a while with no clear purpose for why you would share it at this time. Be really careful about that. I recently learned the term Elmo, which you can use as like a safe word, and it means enough, let's move on. And sometimes, even with the best intentions of just speaking positively and constructively about your challenges and obstacles, you can get into this place where you just start venting and complaining about all the roadblocks and all the issues. And so having a safe word or having an out to say, I think this isn't productive anymore and it's using up kind of our precious time together can be really helpful. My dream, which we haven't done yet because I can't figure out a way to travel with them, is those giant Post-its, they're like 2 by 3 foot large Post-its. My dream is because we usually go somewhere, whether it's a staycation and we get a hotel room or an Airbnb, or we actually travel, fly somewhere, to have those giant Post-its on the wall and to have one that's just like dreams and to have one that's like goals and another one for finances. And then in my mind, you would also have like an Elmo one. And so if there were things that came up that you were complaining about or that you just couldn't resolve, you could kind of park it on that Post-it. And so if there's time later, or if you want to capture it after the fact, you could then know that it isn't being lost or it isn't being disregarded and you aren't being shut down, but that it is being captured and the pain point is acknowledged. So that's what I would suggest. And the last thing, kind of touching on what I was just saying, is it's really important, and it's something we've only recently started to really do, to capture kind of what comes out of these sessions. What were my priorities? We used to have a notebook that we wrote it all down in, but now we do it kind of in Google Docs that's a little bit easier to keep track of. And I don't have to type them up after the sessions. But the more you do them, the more you want to look back and see, has there been growth? Is there consistency? What kind of trends am I seeing with the way I think about my life and my priorities? And you want to have clear action steps coming out of these sessions. So it's important that you're documenting and that it isn't getting kind of lost in the excitement of everything.
That was super fun. We could talk about this all night. I have like 200 questions, but I think that was really a good summary, really hit those questions well. And it was fun to hear you talk about it again because I love these retreats.
Yep. And we have our next one coming up shortly. So I really, really enjoyed sharing this with you guys. If you have any other questions, definitely feel free to reach out. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode or you got value from this episode, feel free to share it with a friend and definitely go onto Apple Podcast and leave a rating and review. So thanks so much for listening, guys. Until next time.
Peace out.
Thanks for listening.